Welcome to Relate Higher, a podcast dedicated to providing the leading standard in conscious higher relating and to teaching you a conscious framework for all of your relationships. This is your go-to resource for developing meaningful, conscious relationships across your life. I'm your host, award-winning relationship coach and consultant and former family lawyer, Letitia Ringe. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. In today's episode, we're talking about doing the work in your relationships. This episode will answer the question that so many people are asking themselves, which is, what work do I need to do in my relationships? Therefore, what does the work look like on my end in a relationship? Now, this is part of our series on the podcast, which is all about creating and cultivating a conscious relationship with yourself. In order to create a conscious relationship with yourself so that you have the capacity to enter into conscious relationships with others, you must know what that conscious work actually looks like. Now, remember, when we talk about being conscious or approaching your relationships consciously or doing the conscious work, we're talking about what is needed to be done to create great relationships in any area of your life: romantic relationships, friendship, family, professional relationships, as well as generally across your community. Now, not only do you learn how to create great relationships with others, you learn how to create a great relationship with yourself. And the work, first and foremost, must be done with ourselves so that we can create those same great environments with other people. In this episode, you'll learn what the work looks like on your end so that you're showing up consciously and doing the work in your relationship with yourself as well as your relationship with others. Now, right now, when you think about your relationships, it's very likely, like most people, you feel a little bit powerless or even trapped, maybe even that relationships are somewhat a little chaotic. You might also feel like relationships are a little bit unsafe, and you might feel confused or unclear about what actually contributes to the success of a relationship. Now, this might be showing up for you directly or indirectly. For most of you, it will be indirectly. Let me explain why these feelings are actually behind a lot of what you're experiencing right now. If you've ever found yourself thinking, I just need to be with the right people, then I will have good relationships. Or when I'm with the right people, my relationships are easy. This is putting all of your power in relationships in something outside of yourself. It means that it just depends on the person or where that particular person and your dynamic is at right now. So in other words, the season of your relationship. Now, this is a huge problem because it means that it sets you up never to learn truly what creates successful, thriving relationships. What creates successful, thriving relationships is learning how to nurture them, learning how to create an environment for your relationships to be successful. This is what we teach you on the podcast. Otherwise, what happens is it's like bringing a plant into your garden. And when you first plant the plant, it thrives. It's doing really well because this plant thrives in the conditions that were present at the time that you planted it. You planted it in the season of summer. Right now, this plant is loving it. Everything's going really great. Then as summer stops and it moves into autumn, the plant dies. And then the plant dies so badly it never comes back to life. Or maybe you don't give it enough time to realize that actually next year in summer it will also come back to life again because the plant's actually seasonal. Now you decide that that plant was right, and now because it's died, it's wrong. But what you don't learn is actually that plant has specific needs to nurture the plant to thrive and also to survive. If you learn the skill of nurturing the plant, then you will have a plant that you will have within your community, your ecosystem or your garden in this case, that will be with you for a very, very long time. Now let's think of this same analogy with relationships. In our relationships, we need to think of them as an ecosystem and as individual little species that all need to be nurtured in specific ways. Now, instead of telling you how each plant needs to be nurtured or how each person and relationship and your dynamic together needs to be nurtured, instead, I'm teaching you here on the podcast how to be conscious and aware so that you can support the plant, which is the relationship and the community and the ecosystem, with what it needs in a moment. In other words, I'm giving you the tools that will be with you for the rest of your lifetime, that will allow you to know how to specifically nurture each of your relationships rather than just giving you the tools that are needed right now in this moment, but then not setting you up with the awareness that will actually have you recognize the tools for any relationship or any plant for the rest of your life. Now, when we think that it's just about the person I'm with and the season that we're in together, this will set you up for having lots of relationships that sometimes thrive, sometimes don't, but they always come to an end. Because one thing that is for sure is that you're always changing. The other people in your life are always changing. So you'll be going through seasons within your life and within your relationships. If you believe that it's about the right person, and if you believe as well that relationships should be easy and they don't require work, or all of the work should look the same for all of your relationships, you set yourself up for your relationships to inevitably end and fail. You will decide, because you're going through a difficult time or a challenging time or a time that requires a lot of work or a time where you're just on different pages, that means your relationships need to end. When in fact, they just need different tools or different breathing space, or they've just dormant for now and they'll come back into your life again in the future in a new or the same way. It could be in some cases that the relationships do need to end. But if you're not doing the work to support the relationship to thrive and to be set up for success, then you will never actually know whether that relationship truly needed to end or whether it was just because you weren't doing the work, the necessary work on your part to create an environment for success for your relationships. This is what you're learning how to do on this podcast. And in this episode, I'm going to explain to you in a different way what the work actually looks like. Now, by the end of this episode, you're not going to feel powerless or confused or overwhelmed or chaotic or unsafe when it comes to your relationships. You're not going to think that it is about relating with the right people and then all your problems will be solved. You will no longer think that relationships don't require any work. Instead, by the end of this episode, you will understand that all of your power comes through the story you tell yourself about the work required in your relationships. You will end the episode feeling empowered and feeling clear on what that work actually is and what your responsibility is in all of your relationships, no matter what, including your relationship with yourself. And finally, what you learn in today's episode can and should be applied to any kind of relationship in your life, as well as to any phase of the relationship cycle you're in right now. So in a romantic context, that looks like whether you're deciding whether to leave a romantic relationship, whether you're completing or separating or divorcing from a romantic partner, whether you're healing after you've separated from a romantic partner, or whether you're out there dating and attracting a new relationship into your life, or whether you're starting a new relationship, or whether you're looking to nurture and improve and evolve a current relationship you're in right now. No matter what stage of the relationship cycle and no matter what relationship area we're looking at, what you learn in today's episode will teach you how to do the work in your relationships and what is required on your end. So to start off, let's talk about how most people approach doing the work in relationships. I've already explained some of this approach in the intro to today's episode, but just as a summary again, most people think that all of the power in their relationships either lies in the people that they're relating with and the season of the relationship that they're in. It's as if there's this powerful force outside of yourself and your quality of relationships just depends by chance on the people you're relating with and the season of your life as well as their life. Others believe that, as well as relationships should just be easy and they shouldn't require work. And when they do require work, that means there's something wrong with the relationship. Now, you might think both of these things, one of these things. You might be aware that you're thinking these things. You might be unaware that you're thinking these things. How it shows up is that when things get hard in your relationships, you see that as meaning your relationships need to come to an end. If you also don't know what the work looks like in relationships, this also tells me that you are not showing up and doing the work that is needed to create an environment for success in your relationships. Now, because we think these things, that relationships shouldn't require work, that relationships should be easy, that if it's hard, then it just means that relationship needs to end, that I just need to find the right people to relate with, the emotional experience you're creating for yourself is one of powerlessness, chaos, confusion, overwhelm, and uncertainty in your relationships. This then leads you to constantly be looking for answers outside of yourself. So it looks like I just need to find the right person to replace this relationship, or I just need to get really, really clear on what I need in relationships and then find people who perfectly match that, and then all of my relationship problems will be solved. So you might find that when you're actually encountering people, you might tend to really overanalyze the people in front of you. Perhaps you're dating right now and this makes it so hard for you to find any matches because you're out there looking for this perfect person rather than understanding that the skills for great relationships actually have very little to do with the person in front of you, and it's more about how you consciously approach your relationships as well as your relationship with yourself, so that you really understand when you're being triggered, you understand when you're operating from your relationship history rather than the relationship in front of you and the person in front of you. You understand what you need and desire, you know how to communicate that. We'll go on in a moment about what the work actually looks like, but that's an example. So instead, you're looking for all of the answers in this other person. If I can just land on the perfect person, then I won't need to do any work, and then I'll finally have successful relationships. The result of this approach is that you end up reconfirming to yourself a deeper belief that either there's just something wrong with you and that is why your relationships just don't work out, or you continue to create a result where your relationships sometimes will be great, other times they're not. It all just feels really chaotic and confusing. You're not really sure how great relationships are created. And so there are seasons in your relationships, maybe a lot of your relationships come to an end, or you've just decided that this is just the way relationships are. Relationships are just hard, and that means you need to manage your expectations about what a relationship should be. Perhaps you decide that you just won't have as many relationships, and then you move throughout your life feeling lonely because you're not actually connected deeply or connected at all with the people that you truly need to thrive in your life. So that's how most of us approach relationships, and it shows up in all sorts of ways. Sometimes we're really controlling with the people around us. Sometimes we just avoid people altogether. Sometimes we have lots of relationships ending. Other times we really cling on to the relationships we have and we don't want to let anyone go because we're afraid that really there's just something wrong with us. And so if these people go, then that means we're not going to be able to find anyone who will actually accept us as we are again. So see, all of the answers are outside of yourself, and it comes from a very scary place. This is how most people are approaching relationships. Instead, this is how you want to approach your relationships, and this is what doing the work looks like. The first thing is you really want to tell yourself a new story. You want to tell yourself a story that goes something like this. I understand that I am responsible for doing the day-to-day, moment-to-moment work to show up in my relationships from a place of consciousness. Now, when you tell yourself a story like this, it's going to create a feeling of empowerment in you. It creates a feeling of responsibility. It creates a feeling of clarity, of certainty. You feel safe because you know how to create great relationships. You know what your work is, you know what you're responsible for. This then allows you to show up in your relationships doing the work that is needed on your end. This looks like you take the time to reflect on your relationship history, to understand what your relationship history looks like, which you'll remember from the previous episodes, looks like your protective patterns, your triggers, your experiences and perceptions of those experiences from past relationships. It looks like understanding what your needs and desires are in relationships and how you get them met and how you have been trying to get them met that don't support your actual relationship needs and desires. It looks like you having an understanding and awareness of this so that as your relationship history is being triggered and you're operating from that history instead of to the person in front of you and the relationship in front of you, you're able to differentiate between this is actually something from the past and a perception. It's not actually the truth. And so I know that, so I can now come back to a place of awareness and presence with this person and actually meet them and meet the moment and meet truth as it actually is right now. It looks like having clear intentions for your relationships. You understand that you're responsible for what you create. So instead of creating more of what you don't want, which will happen if you focus on what you don't want, and also what you leave to being a very high possibility when you're not intentionally setting and making decisions about what you actually want to experience in your relationships. Instead, you decide, this is what I want to experience in this relationship. This is the purpose of our relationship. This is what we're creating when we are in relationship together, and you set clear intentions. You reflect on yourself as to whether what you're experiencing in that relationship is actually aligned with those intentions now or not. You take time to reflect on whether you're coming from a place of fear or whether you're coming from a place of love. You notice what's happening within you. You notice what's happening in your mind, your body, and your intuition when you're relating with others and after you relate with others and when you're thinking about others. You notice and tune into how the other person's energy is impacting the dynamic. What is the other person thinking and feeling? What is the relationship needing? What is the environment, and how is the environment you're in right now with this other person impacting your relationship right now? You're able to tune into all of these things to get information and to expand your awareness. You're able to then use that information to make better decisions about your relationships, or even to just simply ask questions of the other person so that you can find out what their experience actually is. Sometimes you might have more awareness than the other person has, but because of your question, you'll be able to activate a realization within them. It looks like leaning in to have conversations, conscious conversations with the people you relate with, to understand their experience, to come from a place of curiosity so that you have better information for your relationships. It looks like taking the time to nurture your nervous system, to breathe, to relax, to slow down so that you can be aware of what you're bringing to the dynamic between you and the other person, and whether you're coming from a stressed, fear-based response or whether you're actually showing up truly present. It looks like tending to your inner child, to give your inner child, the child self within you, what it actually needs so that you're able to operate from a place where you're full up, you're supported, you're nourished, rather than seeking to have your needs filled by other people because you believe that all of the answers lie outside of yourself, rather than coming from a place where you are supporting yourself to the best of your ability, and then from that abundant, generous place, able to support others and have people also contribute to supporting you. It also looks like understanding what needs some more connection, your masculine energy or your feminine energy, and also being able to see what a moment or an interaction between you and another person needs in terms of your masculine and your feminine energy. It looks like creating intentional containers for moments and experiences within your relationships, moments that might be for a specific purpose, like cleansing the energy between you, or having a conversation simply to understand each other better, having containers for play and for fun, or for creating a very specific experience that is aligned with one of your intentions in the relationship. It could also look like creating an experience where you are doing something lovely for the other person, or where you're practicing receiving something lovely from one of the people that you're relating with. This is what the conscious work in our relationships looks like. And when this combination, which stems from the story you start telling yourself, which is, I am responsible for doing this work, this allows you to feel powerful and empowered. It allows you to feel safe because you know this is the work that you're responsible for in your relationships. This is what sets your relationships up for success. This is what allows you the energy and motivation to show up and actually do this work. And as a result of this story you tell yourself and the feelings you're cultivating and all of these actions you're taking and not taking, you set yourself up to thrive in your relationships. And when relationships do come to an end, because you're doing this work, you know that the relationship is coming to a natural conclusion, maybe forever or maybe just for now. And so you can